Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me even in the back? And if not, then please come forward. The entire purpose of this meeting is to be able to share some important information with you, and I'd like to begin this evening as closely to on time as possible to allow you to be able to speak with me at the end if you would like. The presentation is not meant to be very long, but it is very informative. So I want to thank everyone for being here this evening. I'm Verna Ruffin, the Superintendent of Schools, Chief Spagnolo, the Waterbury Police Department Chief, and Dan Barry, who is our School Security and Safety Director. And we're going to be speaking with all of you tonight about a very important issue, not only in Waterbury Public Schools, but around the nation. And I will start very briefly, but perhaps Chief has some opening remarks as well as Mr. Barry.
Thank you, Doctor. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to come here tonight. The doctor and admin staff at the school district put this safety and security forum together last week. I thought it was a good idea. I was appreciative that I was invited. It's a difficult time out there right now, not only locally, statewide, nationally, when it comes to school security. There have been a number of different threats. I think people are on edge. I think there's a lot of misinformation about what school security looks like these days and what some of the terms we use mean. So I think it might be important tonight to share some of that information, certainly get some feedback from the folks that are here that have interest in providing that. We're going to talk about some recent incidents here in Waterbury. The doctor's going to share, I think, some incidents that are statewide and nationally, and hopefully we can have a robust conversation about school security and the safety of the schools here in Waterbury.
In relation to what Chief mentioned, the safety and security of Waterbury Public Schools is paramount, and every effort is taken to make them as safe as possible. I'm hoping tonight we'll cover some issues that pertain to that, and maybe to some extent elaborate on some other things.
We hope to be able to answer all of the questions that you may have tonight, but ultimately there could be some questions at the end that you did not feel answered your specific question. We ask you to access this QR code that as the presentation goes on, you could immediately send in your questions. In all probability, if the questions are very individualized or they're specific to a particular student or a particular school, then those will be shared with my staff, and you will get a personalized call to be able to answer your question personally as it pertains to you. We want your questions to be answered. We want them to be answered in such a way that you know that they are relevant to you, and that if you have any follow-up questions, you can follow that up with the pertinent staff. So please access this QR code. As you're listening to the presentation, if there are questions, you can certainly add your questions there. At the end of this meeting, I will be here. I will stay as long as you would like to be able to speak with you personally. I do not have a time limit at the end of this meeting. I want to make this about you and about your questions, and I will be out here after this meeting to answer any questions that you may have. Additionally, we have several board members who are here tonight. I'd like our board members to stand and be recognized. Our President, President Sweeney, and Vice President Hernandez are here, but I may have other board members who are here that I did not see, and if you are, please stand and be recognized this evening. I have a large number of our staff. I have our central office staff and a number of our principals and assistant principals in various schools across the district. I would like for you to stand, please. Thank you very, very much. Each and every day, all the people that have stood up are here working with our children in the schools, along with hundreds of staff members. And I take it very seriously and very personally at times that the over 21,000 people that we're ultimately responsible for, 18,700 plus student, plus a number of staff members, we take it very seriously that you want to and you need to know that safety is our first and priority. I'm going to call your attention to a lot of things which are quite alarming across the nation. I'm certain I don't have to tell you, but I will share with you that on a national level, every day we hear about incidences that are occurring in schools and out of schools. We hear about it nationally in other states, in districts that are similar to ours and in districts that are not similar to ours at all. It's frightening. It is really daunting. As law enforcement, I'm certain that it is, but as school personnel, it's extremely challenging because, yes, we want to provide the safest environment for all of our children, yet how do you do that sometimes on this massive form which affects all schools, not only in our nation, but across the world? Those are only a few, and the slide that you're looking at now are a few very pertinent to Connecticut. Some are reported, some are not, but they're all real, and we take them all seriously because anytime a fellow school district has an issue, it really, really concerns all of us because we learn from each other. Not a single one of us went to school as school administrators, school teachers. Not one of us sends our children to school every day thinking that we would be navigating such a huge national and international issue such as we're doing right now, but we are. It's no longer just a matter of what happens within our schools, because oftentimes the headlines are not only about schools, but they put fear in all of us. They put concern in all of our minds, and we wonder and we worry because we hear of things happening in emergency rooms in hospitals, in movie theaters, at bus stops, on the bus, off the bus. We hear about them happening in malls. We hear about things happening in places that we would think would always be safe. Churches, mosques, and places of worship. We hear about things that really places us in such a predicament that we oftentimes don't know how to respond. But collectively, I think it is our responsibility to share, be very transparent, and learn from the things that we do know, and to continue to investigate the things that we do not know. I know many people are here this evening because we've had many questions about Crosby. So I'm going to start by addressing one school, understanding that we are concerned with all of our schools. We have 33 schools in Waterbury Public Schools. Every time there is a safety issue, anytime there is a report, all of those matters are taken very seriously by everyone. Our law enforcement officers, our school resource officers, our police chief, our directors, our principals, all of the teachers, our central office staff are constantly responding and want to be very vigilant anytime anything affects any one of our schools. I'm going to talk specifically about two incidences that did occur at Crosby High School. About 2 weeks ago, there was a report, an allegation, that there was a gun at Crosby High School. At that time, it was an allegation. It was somebody that reported it, and we were very grateful anytime we receive a report. There was a gun. At the time that it was reported as an allegation that there was a gun at Crosby High School. Immediately, there were respondents. Immediately, the police department responds when that occurs. Chief, I don't know if you want to start off by saying some of the things that you did, and then I can go on from there.
Certainly. So, one of the things that is good, really good in this district, in this city, is that we have a strong school resource officer program. There are school resource officers that are assigned to each high school, each middle school, and there are roaming school resource officers that supplement some of the schools that don't have them, like the K-8 schools and some of the elementary schools. And then we have a youth squad that has dedicated supervision and detectives that also work with the school district and work in the schools each and every day. So when a call comes in, like this particular call of a party with a weapon, there are 2 officers already on this campus. Those officers are well-trained in a variety of different disciplines. They're well-trained in de-escalation techniques. They're well-trained in tactical techniques. They have specialized and specific equipment available to them, and they can work with the school administration and immediately start to address or plan how to address a threat while they call for assistance of the police department. That's what happened on this particular day, and within a very short period of time, they were able to mitigate the threat that was here when the young man was arrested with the gun. But I want to go on to say that that happens each and every time that there's a call or a threat, either here at Crosby or one of the other schools within the district. I mean, officers are responding very rapidly, and it's in a very short matter of minutes to where a plan is in place and it's executed, and we're able to make sure that the school is in a safe position. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of follow-up that has to continue in that investigation. Doesn't mean that, you know, there's not information that needs to be fact-checked. Doesn't mean that there's not evidence to still be collected or gathered. But it means that the school is locked down or in a shelter in place, and I think the doctor's going to go over those terms in a little bit, and that's providing a level of safety and security to the staff in the school, the students in the school, and hopefully after this meeting and understanding for some of the parents out there, these students in the school, that there is a level of safety and security in those situations.
Thank you, Chief. When the report initially was sent, it is at the school level and at the police department level, along with the director of school safety, that precautions are made to be able to investigate what that report, because at that time it's an allegation. Within our central office department, we're going to communicate with parents to let them know that we suspect that there is a weapon on campus. We do not know at that point whether there was a gun on that campus. We had allegations that there was a weapon on campus, which was immediately researched. It required intensive work to be able to determine what that threat was. Later, when it was determined that there was a loaded gun, another piece of communication did go out, informing our staff as well as our parents, that our staff and our parents and our students, that it was in fact a loaded gun that was found on the campus. There were no casualties. We were able to report that everyone was safe, but we know that that brings about a level of alarm. And one of the things that we also know, that in any time that a school goes into a shelter in place or a lockdown, in all probability, the social media will probably pick that up before we ever have an opportunity to craft something and to send out the real facts. And social media can be a good thing, but it could also be a bad thing. And so I want to go to the second incident, which happened at Crosby last week. A report that there was a weapon on campus. Definitely, it's the second time, it's a relatively two-week period. People are already nervous. The school went into a lockdown. Of course, immediately, police are on board. The campus is secure. We know where the students are and what the students are doing, and there is an ongoing responsibility from the people inside the school, as well as the people who are responding to the event in the school, to keep everyone in lockdown. At that time, that's what was reported, that there was a weapon on campus. What happened after that is really troubling, because at that time, parents had a right to know that their children were in a school that was in a lockdown, and yes, the communication piece always comes out inside. Somebody in the classroom is going to send something out, but we want to send out the correct information. and we're going to share with you where you can always get that correct information. While some of the people did receive the correct information, there was another social media post that was taken from inside a classroom that was very damaging. And as a parent, I can honestly relate to that, because you're thinking that what you saw on social media might have some truth to it, but it was totally false. That information created a lot of unrest, tears, anger, frustration, fear dominated at that point. And as a result of that, so many parents came to the school thinking that that social media post was real. It was damaging. It created chaos. And it also created such chaos that our entry level was blocked. So in the event we did have an emergency, people could not come in to respond to the people inside the school, because so many people congregated on the sidewalks in front of the school and in the driveway. And this was what I would consider to be a frenzy. It was horrible, because people were scared because they believed what they saw on that social media post. And that social media post was a lie. But fear doesn't always know that. As a result of that, we did have people enter the school building. We did have people enter the school building and further scare the staff and the students, because they knocked on doors and they yelled and they created an environment that was unsafe, while the police and the staff within were trying to contain it. There was no weapon found. But by that time, the harm had already been done, because everyone was extremely afraid. And you were afraid for valid reasons. When we see and hear these headlines that I showed you earlier, it makes every parent, every guardian, every staff member, every student really frightened. But that was false information. And so we want you to understand where to get the right information. And the right information is not as quick as someone who's sitting in the school who says the school's on lockdown. Yes, the school's on lockdown. If you go any further than that without knowing the why, you're spreading a rumor, and you're causing and contributing to even more fear in an environment that is already quite fearful about what happens. As a result of that, after the school was determined there was no weapon, the school was placed on a shelter in place, but the fear had already spread because of that viral media post, which was inaccurate. And so you will want to know, what are we going to do moving forward so that we can make certain that we are not relying on false information, and what we can do to secure all of our campuses in the event that we do have a lockdown or a shelter in place in the future. They're unfortunately quite common in schools today, but you also need to know the why, and you need to understand what we do on our end, which oftentimes prohibits us from being out there, because we need to be inside working with the people that we are working with for the protection of everyone. So Dan, you want to take it from there in terms of what do we do when we do get that report or that call?
And to Dr. Ruffin, Chief, to your points, the safety and security of the Waterbury Public Schools is a paramount and everyday effort on my department's behalf, working with administration to make every single building in Waterbury safe. We work, as Chief mentioned, in collaboration with the Waterbury Police Department on a daily basis, not only with the SROs, but with Youth Squad and Patrol. That is a collaboration that is a 24/7 collaboration, exchange of information, any input from the police department, and in that particular case, Waterbury Public Schools are extremely honored to have that relationship with Waterbury PD. A lot of times you'll hear, coming from the schools and messaging from the schools, as Dr. Ruffin had referenced, terms such as shelter in place and lockdown and what they mean. And if you go into the media, sometimes it can get confusing. So one of the things we wanted to address today is what each of those two things mean. And in the shelter in place, if you hear that or you have a messaging of that from your child's school, it really means that all outside activities are suspended for the time the shelter in place is activated until it's lifted. Exterior doors remain secure, no one is permitted to exit or enter the building, and school staff remain in their classrooms or in their areas. This can be varied in terms of the movement inside the building, but the point of shelter in place is a response to an external threat. Not an internal, but an external threat. It could be police activity outside the building. It could be weather. It could be anything related to anything outside the building that's not safe. So if there's recess outside, gym class, or anything else, they're brought inside and secured in the building. Lockdown is a response to an internal threat, which is an emergency impacting a school campus that prevents a safe evacuation of the school. It is basically a response by staff, which, just like the shelter in place, is drilled upon in the schools the same as fire drills. So this is not something that's enacted when something comes up. It is actually something that is actually drilled into schools on a monthly or every 3-month basis. So it basically is a response to a serious issue within the school that, at that point, locks the building down. Classrooms are secure. Outside doors are secure, in that the communication then comes up with Waterbury PD, and there's an immediate response to the building. That response from Waterbury PD is the response of patrol, the SROs, if they're in the building, as well as other collaborative efforts that we have in place in order to monitor what's going on inside the building.
Chief, you want to add anything? Are you good?
No, I think we're good.
So let's talk a little bit about communications, because oftentimes the notifications, sometimes people think the notifications don't come fast enough. And sometimes the communication doesn't come as fast as the communication that might come if you have someone inside a classroom texting, or if you have someone who is corresponding some kind of way with someone outside. But it's important for the security of everyone inside that we do not communicate something unless it is 100% accurate. And for that, it requires collaboration between the police department and Waterbury Public Schools and the schools directly. I'll give you an example of that. It would not have been accurate had we communicated with you that there's a gun in Crosby High School until we had determined for a fact it was a gun and that it was loaded. It would not have been accurate. And we will post our accurate information on Parent Square. And we will reiterate tonight how important it is for every single parent and guardian, every single staff member, every single member who works in Waterbury Public Schools to have Parent Square, because that is your first point of accurate information 100% of the time. We're not going to post it out on social media, although social media will always have a take on whatever's going on in Waterbury Public Schools. It may or may not be accurate at all. But what we will post on Parent Square will be accurate. And it may take a little bit longer than someone thinks it should, but it needs to be accurate, because if we post inaccurate information never goes back to clarify itself at all. It stays out there. We want to make certain that the information is accurate, that it is verified, and that it is true, and it is in collaboration with the Waterbury Police Department. The district is already aware that, as I shared with you, it could be delayed. And it's not delayed because we don't want you to know. It's delayed because we're already enacting the shelter in place or the lockdown. We know where the kids are. We know that they're safe inside. What we need to know is the level of the threat, if there is one. We ask everyone to familiarize themselves with Parent Square. At the time that we invested in Parent Square about 4 years ago, it was considered one of the best ways of communication. And then parents told me that there was too much in communication because you got too many alerts on Parent Square. I think that too much information is better than not enough information. That is our number one source for posting, whether it's relative to one school or it's relative to a number of schools. Now, when things happen at Crosby High School, it affects Wallace Middle School. It may affect Wallace Middle School because they need to be on alert that there's something going on at an adjacent school. The same thing would apply if it's at Wilby or North End. The same thing kind of sort of applies as if it is at West Side and at Kennedy. Sometimes it's schools in close proximity of each other, like a cluster of elementary schools. Or sometimes it's a whole cluster of schools with the elementary, middle, and the high school. It depends on the incident. It depends on what the particular scenario is. But whenever there's a shelter in place, whenever there's a lockdown, you will be notified through Parent Square. I ask you to keep that first and foremost as your primary means of determining what's happening within a school, especially if you're concerned about a lockdown or a shelter in place. If you have any difficulties registering for Parent Square, please see the administrator at your school immediately for some assistance. If you're trying to download this particular app tonight, you're not able to have access, then I strongly suggest to you that tomorrow that you make contact with your school so that the school can help you. I can't reiterate enough how important that is to making certain that you have accurate information and as timely as possible. Now, I mentioned to you that social media has its benefits, but it's also problematic and can share and spread false information. I gave you a specific example of how that hurt us this week. And it hurt us because whenever parents are afraid, parents will do anything for their children, and I totally understand that. Totally understand it. No one needs to explain that to me. But it's very, very heart-wrenching when that information is being fueled by false information, which did happen this week, and it created some problems for us. And Chief, you may want to talk, or Dan, you may want to talk about some safety precautions that we will put in place to assure that this does not happen again. I can't tell you that the social media posts and the wrong information won't happen again, because you and I both know that misinformation is out there every day. People just believe it so much that they sometimes believe that instead of the facts.
I think one of the things that came out of the issue that Dr. Ruffin had referred to was the method or manner in which we go about communicating the issues that go on at an emergency situation. I think there's been quite a few changes in relation to that, and with collaboration with Waterbury PD going over the incident itself, I believe going forward that our response will be even that much greater to a situation like that from a communication standpoint inside the building and outside the building as well.
Yeah, there's a lot that that goes into the security of the buildings. You know, as I spoke about earlier, we've got the school resource officer program, so there's officers on campus. We also have a highly technology-driven room at the police department called the Real-Time Crime Center. There is school safety security personnel stationed within that center during the school day. There's, I don't know the exact number, but it's I think over 1,000 cameras at this point, or well over 1,000 cameras at this point, that not only the school safety security officer, but the crime analysts, the detectives, and the supervisors that are stationed in that room, along with our state partners, can monitor what's going on in the schools. If we get a call, they're connected right to the dispatch center, so if they get a call, they can bring those images up immediately and start to make determinations on what a response would be, what the threat may be, and try to corroborate information that we're receiving. So there's a lot that goes behind the scenes, and as administrators in the school, you know, we've worked very closely with the district on a number of different technology products. Mutual Link is a product that allows for administrators and school staff to immediately alert others of an incident going on in the school. It helps us isolate the area that incident is going on in, so we can try to utilize cameras or have a better police response. We've done a lot of mapping of the schools. We have digital mapping of the schools, so we understand where all the pitfalls may be, where all the mechanicals are, where the classrooms are, where the entrances and exits are. So, and we train all this, and our officers train all this, working with the school district. Some of the things that we talked about after the most recent incident at Crosby High School was just a more unified response, working together, potentially in one room in that crime center, or creating another operations center at the school, a central office in the school district, so we can communicate and try to get information out there earlier. But, you know, as I'm sure you all know, I mean, it's really difficult to beat information technology out on social media. It's impossible for us as police officers or school administrators to be able to provide accurate information that we're confident is accurate, that's been fact-checked in a manner faster than somebody taking a screenshot of a whiteboard or a note or a person and pumping it out to their network on social media. So that's why, you know, we say, listen, call the school. I mean, the worst thing you can do, in my opinion, is share that information if that's how you received it. I think you need to take it upon yourself to fact check that information a little bit before you believe it or before you share it with anyone else. And there are outlets out there for you to do it. I mean, they're antiquated compared to today's technology. It may be a phone call to the main office. You may not get an answer depending on what the situation is. It may be a phone call to the routine line at the police department. You'll get an answer, but you may not get exactly the information you want right away. But we can try. We can try those things before we react in a way to where it just causes more concern for everybody. And I think that that's really important. That's definitely one of the takeaways. We were up here a year or so ago in the beginning of the school year talking about the inordinate amount of threats that we were having, not only at Waterbury Public Schools, but schools across the state. And, you know, we made a number of arrests in those situations, as well as other police departments did. But a lot of those threats came from outside the school district, were shared, copied, pasted, shared with their network, this network, that network, and interpreted differently by each and every group of people that got them to believe that, you know, maybe Crosby was the place the threat was at, or maybe, you know, Willoughby was the place the threat was at. In some cases, the threat was not even at a school in Waterbury. It was at a school in an outside district, but it still caused a lot of tension and pressure and anxiety for people in the school community, parents, students, school staff. And of course, the police, we just try to respond to those things. So it's just really important I'm a parent of 3, I get it, but it's super important to just take a breath, think about it for a minute, and try to fact check some of this information, unless it's coming from a verified source.
Thank you, Chief. It's also what we've seen, and when people have been addressing these issues, oftentimes we get asked questions, well, why don't you have police officers at every single school? Why don't you have metal detectors? Or why don't you have this and, you know, these resources? We hear that, you know, maybe it's time to do those kinds of things. I want to also share with you how important it is to not think that there is just one type of solution that's going to stop anything any more than people really trusting and communicating amongst each other. And I want to give you some specific examples of that. While metal detectors in some people's minds would be able to track perhaps if someone were to try to get into a school with a metal detector, with a gun, or perhaps with a large knife, some people believe that it would do that. What it will not do, it will not prevent somebody from opening a back door and letting someone unauthorized walk into your building, which has happened. A metal detector is not going to be able to stop someone from opening a door and letting someone in. That's been probably the most serious, the serious breach that we have had, in doors not being secured because someone either propped them open or someone did not take the time to secure them to make certain that all doors were securely locked. No one can do that by having a metal detector. No one can best help the situation better than someone who hears something and says something, which is why it's critically important that you share and that you know that we have this free resource throughout Waterbury Public Schools. It's available to all of our students, and it's 24/7. It alerts someone at any hour of the day or night if there's a potential threat. So if that threat happens in the community, if that threat happens inside a school, if that threat happens in someone's household, this is a 24/7 access that our students can apply if they choose to be anonymous, if they choose to just say, hey, I'm really hurting, I need someone to know this. And we have shared this a number of times. Counselors and principals, administrators have shared this with their students on their campus. We've shared it with parents at several of my parent advisory groups. But it's important to get that information out to every single person who has an investment in Waterbury Public Schools. It's a free resource, but it's important to be able to connect with families, to connect with children, and to know what they're thinking. It could stop self-harm if it's reported. It could also help us to be able to determine if there's something that we need to investigate before the school day begins even. Another important thing for parents and staff and everyone to know is that just like Waterbury Public Schools is experiencing a teacher shortage, we've been very fortunate. We were able to hire 134 teachers after we started the school year with over 200 teachers short. But at the same time, we're still short, and we're short those critical areas. Just like Waterbury Public Schools is short on teaching staff, the Waterbury Police Department is also short on staff. And so when you talk about putting one officer in 33 schools, that we're talking something that's an impossibility at this point. And so we want to look for things that we can do sooner than later. We are especially grateful that we have the immediate response that we get from the police department, so that is not a delay. But to think that we could possibly have one officer for every single one of our 33 schools is probably not something that is feasible for us to either get and or to sustain over time. But there are so many things that we can and we have done. The children that are in Waterbury Public Schools, I do believe wholeheartedly that school is the safest place. I believe schools are safe. I believe that there are students that are creating issues in schools, however, that may not need to continue coming to the same type school because they are either fighting too often and created an environment that do not create a safe environment for the other people that are here that are very, very much solely interested in learning. And I do believe that within the authority of the principals and the administrators, there's a tremendous amount of autonomy to be able to do something about that. And I want to give you some examples of that. I'm not a proponent for putting children out of school, so I don't want you to leave here saying, oh, the superintendent says they're suspending everybody who doesn't do what I say. That I don't believe that you can suspend your way into excellence any more than I think you can arrest your way into excellence. But I do believe that suspension doesn't work. I do believe that arrests do not work. And I'll give you an example. An arrest for a student, let's say it was a student who brought a gun on campus. That student might be released the very next day because law enforcement has taken it to their full extent, and that child is out in the custody of a parent the very next day. Sometimes it's the same day. A school principal, on the other hand, could suspend a child for a maximum of 10 days. Suspension doesn't work either. I think we're going to need some additional resources to provide some kind of intervention that changes the behavior. Changing the behavior is hard work. But I think we have to look at other structures to be able to address this problem that's only growing. And I will give you another example. There are programs that we have in Waterbury Public Schools that we are examining at replicating, because we believe that we could reduce the suspensions, but providing the required therapeutic care and attention that a child might need before they come back into a school setting and create more fights. And I stress and want you to know that that is something we very much are committed to. Not putting children out, but getting children to the right resources that they need, which may not be the school that they came from, until such time as they get the proper therapeutic care, the clinician, the counseling, the social and emotional care, the behavior management therapy, the tools that they need so that they can be successful upon their return. But just a 10-day suspension does not work. An arrest does not work. And I think it needs to start very early, because we can see behaviors creeping in when the behaviors are only mitigated by a number of days being suspended. And I think that's going to be an outcry moving forward for our community partners and our community resources to be able to create such an environment that does not automatically return a student that's repeatedly fighting in schools. Because I hear from parents who don't like to send their children to school because they see so many fights happening. And I don't blame you. That's not why we send our children to school. At the same time, I'm pretty sure that the parents whose children are exhibiting that behavior probably don't know what to do with them either. So I think that it's very important that we look at, so what else is out there that either has worked somewhere else, and I want to tell you there are very few places that know what to do with that. So Waterbury, we're committed to trying to find a solution, but it's going to take a full community. It can't be done only at the school level, and it can't be done at the law enforcement area. It has to be more of the social services that we need to provide, and it needs to start early.
Can I just
Absolutely.
piggyback on that? So the doctor brings up a really great point, and I heard this misinformation today about school-based arrests, and someone had said to me that they believe that there was a new procedure in place where Waterbury police couldn't even touch a kid unless they were over the age of 17 years old. That's not accurate. So since the turn of the new year, the superintendent, myself, her cabinet, the officer in charge of the youth squad, Lieutenant Kim Bennett, and some other police officers have been meeting on a weekly basis to discuss school-based arrests, to discuss alternatives to those arrests, and how we're going to handle them. Because, as the doctor put it, the kid with the gun, he was an adult, but and he got a bond reduction, and is back out on the street. A juvenile with a gun is going to be back out on the street the next day. Juveniles, anybody under the age of 18 that engages in a fight, is going to go home to their parents or guardian that day. They're not going to jail. So we recognize that that is not, it's not a long-term fix. It's a short-term tool that we can use as police officers, conferring with administrative staff, conferring with families, or just using it to mitigate a serious situation quickly. But it's not a long-term fix. It's not gonna even flow into daybreak the next day. It's not gonna help us. So using diversionary programs, like the Juvenile Review Board, like the KIDS program, which was developed here in the police department with the school district several years ago as a diversion to arrest, is a good thing, because we're including those kids, we're touching those kids a lot longer, as far as meeting with them, getting them involved with social services that they may need. We're dealing with their families on a longer basis, anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks if you're at the Juvenile Review Board, potentially up to 6 months. And we're paying attention to what's going on with their lives and trying to support them and their families to try to work through this crisis that they're going through, as opposed to arresting them, sending them to juvenile court, having them released, and going back to school the next day. So there has been a change. I think it's for the better, right? We're going to have to continue to work on it. Again, since the beginning of the year, we've been really developing this. There's been so many discussions about what else we can do for diversionary programs, what else we can do to support, our children in the school district and families in the school district with social services. And the doctor has some great ideas, and she's right. I mean, I don't like it when they're out of school suspension, because then we're just going to deal with them in the park or on the street or in a stolen car or somewhere else. So it's really important that we continue to focus on this, but it's just not. It's not something that's going to change overnight. It's going to take some time. But there's a significant amount that's being worked on, or work on this. And I just want to make sure everybody understands, if there's a fight in the school or a law is broken in the school, and the administrative staff feels that it rises to the level that the police need to be there, the police respond and we take action. Just because we don't slap a set of handcuffs on a student and pull them out of the school and bring them to the police station doesn't mean that we haven't engaged some sort of intervention and taken some sort of action and mitigated that incident to where the officer and the officer's supervisors feel that the school community is safe, that the staff are safe, and that the children are safe.
Anything to add? So where do we go next, and what can we do? I want to thank you for being here, because as a community, I will say that I think I have more of my administrators here than I have parents who are here tonight, but I'm so grateful for the parents who are here. Will the parents and guardians who are here tonight please stand? Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, because you care, you are concerned, and you're probably going to help us to make certain that others can reach out, but it's going to take all of us. So here's some next steps. As a community, we need to keep the lines of communication open, the right lines of communication. You need to expect that you're going to be getting those Parent Square notifications. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to get them all because we have lockdowns or we have a shelter in place. But please, please don't complain when we send them, because we have graduations and honors nights and all of these wonderful things. And it may seem excessive, but we're going to communicate everything there. And it's going to be accurate. It's going to be to the point of the freshest information that we have. Reporting is always important. So if you're on your social media page and people are saying things and you don't believe they're true, or let's say you believe they're true, please notify someone at the school level immediately so we can address it. We've received a lot of contact that way. Someone hears something, they say something. You still have that access, and we want you to continue to pay attention to that. Please don't fall prey into wrong information. And for God's sakes, if someone sends out a social media post that could create that kind of fear that it did this week, please don't send that out to someone else. Let us know. We can't do anything about it immediately other than to tell you the right thing. And I think if you have the right information, you have a lot on your hands that you can deal rationally with a situation that could be scary for all of us in 2023. Any questions that you have, you can send them here. If it's related specifically.
The QR code doesn't work.
It doesn't work?
The link should be fixed now, so if you have questions, if it's still not working.
Try, if you can ask any questions, try this link, because I was told that it is now working. You can ask questions via that point. I am not leaving, as I told you earlier. I will answer your questions, but this is the way. For instance, if you have a question and it's related to maybe something personal that we can't discuss in the full group, members of my staff will personally reach out to you and answer your questions specific. If you have a question before you leave here, I will answer your question. I'm not leaving till your questions are answered today if I have the answer to your question. Do you have anything you add? At this time, the formal meeting is over, but I am not leaving. I will be there to answer your questions. Thank you very much for being here this evening.